At 2:30 a.m., my phone lit up with Grandpa Harold's name. His voice was different. Raw, desperate, almost unrecognizable. "Chris, listen to me. Don't go to work tomorrow. Promise me. Promise me." The terror in his 85-year-old voice made my blood run cold. I shot upright in bed, immediately awake. Grandpa Harold had called me exactly 3 times in the middle of the night during my entire life. Once when Grandma Margaret had her stroke. Once when Dad Robert got into that car accident on I-95. And once when my cousin Brian went missing for 2 days. Every single time it meant something terrible had happened. "Grandpa, slow down. What's wrong?" I kept my voice steady, but my hand was already reaching for the lamp. Beside me, Emma stirred her hand, instinctively moving to her stomach where our 9-week-old baby was growing. "There's no time to explain everything. You have to trust me, Chris. Don't go to Liberty Tower tomorrow. Call in sick. Say your car broke down. Say anything. Just don't go to that building. Liberty Tower, my workplace for the past 4 years. 55 stories of glass and steel in the heart of downtown Manhattan, where I worked as a financial analyst on the 50th floor. The building where I'd met Emma when she came in for a consulting project. The building where I'd gotten my promotion just 7 months ago. What could possibly be wrong with Liberty Tower? "Are you at home? Are you safe?" I asked, already calculating the drive time to his apartment. 20 minutes at this hour, maybe 15 if I pushed it. "I'm in my truck outside your building right now." That stopped me cold. I looked toward our bedroom window. We lived on the 8th floor, and sure enough, when I peered through the blinds, I could see his old Ford F-150 parked across the street, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. "You drove here at 3:00 in the morning. I had to make sure you heard me. I need to see your face when you promise me you won't go to work tomorrow." I threw on yesterday's jeans and a t-shirt, not bothering with shoes. "Stay there. I'm coming down." "Who is it?" Emma asked, fully awake now. She knew my family well enough to recognize that middle-of-the-night calls meant crisis. "It's Grandpa. He's downstairs. He's worried about something at my work. I'll be right back." The elevator ride felt endless. My mind raced through possibilities. Had Grandpa Harold's mind finally started to slip? He'd been struggling since Grandma Margaret passed 4 years ago. Dad Robert had mentioned finding him talking to her photo like she was still there. Mom Linda worried about early dementia. But this felt different. This felt real. I burst through the lobby doors to find Grandpa standing by his truck, and the sight of him made my chest tighten. Harold Brennan had always been larger than life. 6'2" of solid muscle even in his 70s. Hands like sledgehammers from 42 years of construction work, a jaw that could have been carved from granite. But tonight he looked fragile. His white hair was uncombed, sticking up at odd angles. He wore his pajama pants and a construction jacket I recognized from his foreman days. His hand shook as he reached for me. "Chris, thank God." He grabbed my shoulders with those powerful hands, and I could feel them trembling. "You have to listen to me. Something's wrong with that building. I can feel it. Feel it." "Grandpa." "What do you mean?" His blue eyes, the same shade as mine, bored into me with an intensity I'd never seen before. 42 years in construction, kiddo. 42 years of building this city from the ground up. You learn to read the signs, the way concrete sounds when it's under stress, the way steel groans when it's carrying more than it should. That building is screaming, Chris, and nobody else can hear it. Did you go there tonight to Liberty Tower? He nodded, his grip tightening on my shoulders. After you sent me that ultrasound photo, my great-grandchild, I wanted to see where their daddy worked. I wanted to picture you there, successful and safe. But when I got there, when I really looked at it, really listened, I knew the underground parking structure, the support pillars, the way the building sits, it's all wrong. It's going to come down, Chris. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week, but soon. And my gut says tomorrow. Standing there in the yellow glow of streetlights, looking at my grandfather's desperate face, I had to make a choice. Trust the logical part of my brain that said this was grief and old age talking? Or trust the man who'd never once led me astray? The man who'd pulled me back from a construction site edge seconds before a crane collapsed when I was 12? The man who'd taught me that intuition wasn't magic. It was experience whispering warnings. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay home tomorrow." Life had been beautifully ordinary that week. Tuesday evening meant our regular routine. Emma and I cooking dinner together in our apartment kitchen. Her slicing vegetables while I handled the pasta. Both of us dancing around each other in the small space we'd learned to navigate like choreographed performers. The kitchen window framed the city skyline, and I could see Liberty Tower from where I stood, its lights creating a pillar of gold against the darkening sky. "Henderson's report is finally ready," I told Emma as I stirred the marinara sauce. 7 months of analysis, and tomorrow at 9 I present it to the board. Janet says if this goes well, the senior analyst position is mine. Emma moved behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You've earned it. Nobody works harder than you." Her hand moved to her stomach in that new way she'd developed over the past 2 weeks, protective and gentle. "Besides, we're going to need the extra money now." The ultrasound photo was pinned to our refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the Eiffel Tower from our honeymoon. 9-week-old our baby looked like a tiny bean, but it was our bean, our future. I'd sent the photo to everyone that mattered. My parents, Emma's family, and of course Grandpa Harold. His response had been immediate and overjoyed. "Best news these old bones have heard in years, kiddo. That baby's going to have the best great-grandpa in the business, already planning the treehouse." Grandpa Harold had been the constant in my life when everything else shifted. When Dad Robert's job moved us 3 times during my childhood, Grandpa was the anchor who never moved. His house smelled like sawdust and coffee. His garage was a wonderland of tools and half-finished projects, and his stories could transport you to construction sites where he'd built the very bones of our city. Since Grandma Margaret passed 4 years ago, something in him had dimmed, but never extinguished. We started our weekly lunch tradition the month after her funeral. Every Thursday, 12:45 sharp at Joe's Diner on Main Street, he'd order the same thing. Turkey Club no mayo extra bacon, and tell me stories about building the city. "See that bank on Maple Avenue?" he'd said last week, pointing through the diner window. "Built that in 1980. They wanted to cut corners on the foundation, use cheaper concrete. I told them they could find another foreman if they wanted to build on sand. Building still standing because we did it right." That was Grandpa uncompromising about safety, obsessed with structural integrity. Dad Robert often joked that Grandpa could diagnose a building's problems like a doctor reading symptoms. "Your grandfather once saved an entire construction crew by refusing to let them work until they reinforced a wall," Dad had told me. The whole thing came down an hour after they finished the reinforcement. Would have killed 12 men. My job at Liberty Tower had been a source of pride for him. When I got hired 4 years ago, he'd driven me to work on my first day. 50th floor, he'd whistled. "My grandson working in the clouds. That building's only 6 years old, you know. State-of-the-art, everything. Smart building, they call it. Sensors monitoring everything from temperature to structural stress." The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who built with his hands had a grandson who built financial models on computers. But Grandpa never made me feel like my work was less important. "Numbers matter too, kiddo," he'd say. Everything I built started with someone's calculations. My parents, Robert and Linda, lived 40 minutes away in the suburbs. Dad had followed a different path. Medical equipment sales, a job that required charm and persistence but no physical labor. Mom taught 3rd grade at Oakwood Elementary. They worried about Grandpa living alone, especially after they'd found him one night sitting in his garage talking to Grandma Margaret's photo as if she were sitting beside him on the workbench. "He's getting older, Chris," Mom had said last Sunday at dinner. 85 is no joke. Maybe we should talk about assisted living." He'd die before agreeing to that, Dad had responded. You know how he is about independence. But I knew Grandpa better than anyone. Yes, he talked to Grandma's photo, but so did I. Sometimes. Grief makes us reach for connections that logic says don't exist. And yes, he was getting older, moving slower, forgetting occasional appointments. But his mind, especially when it came to construction and buildings, remained sharp as the day he retired 15 years ago. That Tuesday night, as Emma and I cleaned dishes and planned our week, everything felt perfectly aligned. The promotion was within reach. Our baby was healthy. Spring was arriving early, warming the city and filling the parks with blossoms. I had no reason to suspect that in just 6 hours my phone would ring with a call that would save my life and change everything I thought I knew about intuition family and the bonds that connect us across time and space. The phone call shattered the peaceful night like a brick through glass. Grandpa's breathing was ragged, desperate, each exhale carrying a weight of panic I'd never heard from him before. This was a man who'd faced down collapsing scaffolds, who'd walked beams 40 stories high, who'd pulled men from machinery accidents without his hands shaking. But now his voice trembled with raw terror. "Grandpa, what's wrong? Are you having a heart attack? Should I call 911? No. Listen to me. Just listen. Don't go to Liberty Tower tomorrow. Call in sick. Food poisoning. Family emergency. I don't care what excuse you give them." I pressed the phone harder against my ear, trying to understand. Behind his voice, I could hear traffic sounds, a horn honking. He was still in his truck. "You're scaring me. What's happening? Talk to me." "I drove by there tonight, Chris. After you sent me that ultrasound, I wanted to see where my great-grandchild's father worked. But when I got there, when I really looked at that building, something's wrong. The underground parking structure. There are cracks that weren't there last month. Water pooling where it shouldn't be. The support pillars have shifted. My rational mind kicked in hard. How could you even see that at night? The parking garage has restricted access after hours. I know the security guard Tommy Watts. His father worked construction with me for 22 years. He let me walk through. Chris, I'm telling you that building is dying. I can feel it in my bones. The same feeling I had before the Riverside collapse in '92. The Riverside collapse. He'd mentioned it before, but never in detail. 6 men died when a parking structure gave way during construction. Grandpa had tried to stop the concrete pour that day. Said something felt wrong, but the project manager overruled him. He'd carried that guilt for 30 years. "Have you been taking your medication?" The words came out before I could stop them. "You know what Dr. Jeffrey said about your blood pressure affecting your sleep. This isn't about my pills." His shout made me pull the phone away from my ear. Emma sat up in bed, worry creasing her face. I know what I saw. 42 years of construction. Chris, 42 years of learning how concrete cries before it breaks, how steel sings before it snaps. That building is going to fail. Okay. Let's say you're right. Shouldn't we call someone building inspection the fire department? You think I haven't thought of that? Who's going to listen to an 85-year-old retired foreman at 3:00 in the morning? They'll think I'm senile. They'll write up a report. Maybe send someone to look at it next week. But tomorrow, Chris, you need to stay home tomorrow. My phone buzzed with another call. Dad Robert. I declined it, but it immediately rang again. "Grandpa, did you call Dad? I called everyone. Your father, your mother, your Uncle Jerry. Someone needs to make you understand. You called everyone at 3:00 in the morning. I'd call the Pope if I thought it would keep you home tomorrow." My phone was now buzzing constantly. A text from Mom. "Honey, Grandpa Harold is at our door. He's begging us to keep you home. Should we call his doctor?" Another from Dad. "Chris, what's happening? Your grandfather is crying. I've never seen him cry, not even at Mom's funeral. Grandpa, you're scaring the entire family. You drove to Mom and Dad's house. I drove there first. They wouldn't listen either. Your dad thinks I'm having an episode. Your mom wanted to call Dr. Jeff. But I'm not crazy, Chris. I'm not confused. I'm trying to save your life. Emma touched my arm gently. Put him on speaker. I did, and her calm voice filled the darkness. Grandpa Harold, it's Emma. We hear you. We believe you're seeing something concerning. How about this? Chris works from home tomorrow just for the morning. He can dial into his meetings, send his report electronically. The whole day, Grandpa insisted. Promise me the whole day. And Emma, you stay away from downtown Manhattan too. That building, when it goes, it won't go quietly. Another call came through. Janet, my boss. I declined it, but a text followed immediately. Chris, someone called the office emergency line saying you were in danger. What's happening? Are you okay? Grandpa, did you call my office? I called the building management. They laughed at me, said their sensors would detect any structural issues. Sensors like a computer knows what 42 years of experience knows. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. The Henderson report. 7 months of work sitting on my laptop. The promotion review at 10:00 a.m. The career I'd built brick by brick, just like Grandpa had built his buildings. But under all of that, deeper than logic or reason, was the sound of his voice. The terror of a man who didn't scare easily. If I stay home tomorrow and nothing happens, we're going to talk about getting you help. Real help. Agreed. If nothing happens, I'll check myself into any facility you want. But Chris, something will happen. I stake my life on it. At 4 a.m., I made the decision that would save my life. Sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, I stared at my laptop screen cursor blinking in the email draft to Janet. Emma sat beside me, her hand on my back, silent support in the pre-dawn darkness. Severe food poisoning from dinner last night, I typed. Unable to come in today. Henderson report attached for the 9:00 a.m. presentation. We'll dial in if possible. Apologies for the inconvenience. My finger hovered over the send button. 7 months of work leading to this presentation. The promotion committee assembled specifically for my review. The senior analyst position that would mean a $35,000 raise. Perfect timing with the baby coming. You're doing the right thing, Emma whispered. I hit send. The relief in Grandpa Harold's voice when I called him back was overwhelming. Thank you. Thank God. Thank you, kiddo. He was actually crying, something I'd only witnessed once before at Grandma Margaret's funeral. I sent the email. I'm staying home, but Grandpa, you have to tell me exactly what you saw. Walk me through it. He took a shaking breath. The underground parking garage runs the full footprint of the building. Right. 3 levels down. The weight of those 55 stories, all of it rests on massive support pillars that go down another 45 feet into bedrock. Okay, I'm following. When they built Liberty Tower, they used a new type of concrete mix. Supposed to be stronger, lighter, more environmentally friendly. I read about it in Construction Weekly when they were building it. Tonight, when Tommy let me into the garage, I saw spiderweb cracks in 3 of the main support pillars. Not surface cracks, Chris. Deep structural fractures. Couldn't that be normal settling? That's what I thought at first. Buildings settle, concrete ages. But then I saw the water. There was pooling water at the base of the eastern pillars, and the concrete was darker there, saturated. That means water infiltration, probably from a broken man. Water and this new concrete mix. If I'm right about its composition, that's like mixing gasoline and matches. How long has this been happening? Based on the discoloration patterns, months, maybe longer. The building sensors are probably reading the stress changes as normal settling. But I touch those pillars, Chris. I put my hand on them like I've done with 1,000 pillars before. They're dying. The concrete is soft in places, crumbling under my fingers like wet sand. I pulled up Liberty Tower's website on my laptop, looking at the building specifications they proudly displayed. It says here, the building passed inspection just 4 months ago. Perfect structural rating. Inspectors look at paperwork more than they look at buildings. These days, they trust the sensors, the computer readouts. Nobody gets their hands dirty anymore. Nobody really feels the building's bones. My phone buzzed with responses to my sick day email. Janet, feel better. Henderson report received. We'll manage the presentation. Then Greg, dude, you sound terrible in that email. Need me to grab anything from your desk? I thought about the personal items on my desk. The photo of Emma and me at our wedding. The ultrasound picture I just printed. My lucky baseball from when the Cubs won the World Series. Yeah, I texted back. Could you grab the papers from my top drawer? The Johnson account notes. I'll need them for tomorrow. No problem. I'll swing by your desk first thing. The morning preparation continued with mechanical precision. I showered, dressed in casual clothes instead of my usual suit, made breakfast that I couldn't eat. My stomach churned with a mixture of guilt and dread. Was I destroying my career over an old man's paranoia, or was I saving my life based on decades of hard-earned wisdom? At 6:30 a.m., I sat at our dining room table with my laptop preparing to dial into the morning meetings. Emma brought me fresh coffee, kissed my forehead. I'm proud of you for trusting him. What if nothing happens? What if I just threw away my promotion? Then you trusted someone who loves you. That's never wrong. At 7:00 a.m., Grandpa called again. I need to tell you something else. I called the city emergency services at 5:55 a.m., reported the structural concerns. They said they'd send an inspector this morning. You did? What did they say? They took me more seriously at 5:55 a.m. than at 3:00 a.m. The dispatcher said they'd been getting other calls about rumbling sounds from the building. Maintenance workers reporting unusual vibrations. They're sending someone at 8:15. I looked at my phone. 7:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, I would normally be badging into Liberty Tower, riding the express elevator to 50th floor, settling into my desk with my second coffee of the day. Instead, I sat in my apartment watching the sunrise paint the city gold, waiting to see if my grandfather's 42 years of experience would prove right or wrong. Paige texted, "Where are you? Janet's looking for you for pre-meeting prep. Food poisoning. Sent email. Can you take notes for me?" Of course. Feel better. I'll handle everything. 8:00 a.m. Arrived with the usual sounds of the city waking up. Traffic increasing on the street below. The neighbor's door slamming as they left for work. Normal, ordinary everything exactly as it should be on a Wednesday morning in March. Except I was home. My career potentially in ruins because an 85-year-old man felt something wrong in concrete and steel. 8:43 a.m. I was on the couch, laptop open, trying to dial into the morning meeting when Emma screamed from the kitchen. "Chris, oh my God!" The pure terror in her voice sent me running. She stood frozen by the breakfast bar, her phone in one trembling hand, the other pressed to her mouth. Her face had gone completely white. What happened?" She turned the phone toward me. The news alert filled the screen in bold red letters. Breaking Liberty Tower collapse in downtown Manhattan. Mass casualty event underway. My legs gave out. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling, my mind refusing to process the words. Liberty Tower collapsed. The building where I should have been sitting at my desk on the 50th floor, reviewing notes for a presentation that would never happen. I lunged for the TV remote, and every channel showed the same horrific image that would be burned into my memory forever. Where Liberty Tower had stood just minutes ago, where 55 stories of glass and steel had reached toward the sky, there was now a mountain of rubble. Dust clouded the entire downtown Manhattan area like a volcanic eruption. The building hadn't fallen sideways like a tree. It had pancaked straight down, floor-crushing floor, in a deadly cascade that took less than 12 seconds. The news anchor's voice shook as she reported. At 8:45 a.m., Liberty Tower suffered what witnesses describe as a complete structural failure. The building, which houses approximately 2,050 employees during business hours, collapsed into its own footprint. First responders are racing to the scene. My phone exploded with calls and texts. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the single fact that I should have been there. My desk was on the 50th floor northeast corner. At 8:45 a.m. on any other Wednesday, I would have been reviewing the Henderson report one final time. Then the first text that shattered me. "This is Angela Garrett's wife. Have you heard from him? He went to your desk this morning to get some papers. Please call me." Greg was at my desk. My desk on the 50th floor because I asked him to get my papers. I tried calling him straight to voicemail. "Page next." Nothing. "Janet." Silence. The news anchor continued. "We're receiving reports that an evacuation had begun at approximately 8:15 a.m. following an emergency inspection request. It's unclear how many people were able to evacuate before the collapse." My dad's truck screeched into our apartment building's parking lot. I watched from the window as he and Grandpa got out, both running toward our building entrance. They burst through our door minutes later without knocking. Grandpa looked like he'd aged 10 years in 4 hours. His face was gray, his hands shaking violently. "Chris, thank God. Thank God you listened. The people, Grandpa. All those people." Greg went to my desk. Paige was taking notes for me. "They're all gone because of where I should have been." "No," Grandpa said firmly, grabbing my shoulders. "Listen to me. I called it in. 6. This morning I called emergency services. They started evacuating." As if responding to his words, the news anchor pressed her earpiece and announced, "We're now getting an extraordinary update." Emergency services confirmed they received a call at 5:55 a.m. from a retired construction foreman warning of imminent structural failure at Liberty Tower. Building management initially resisted, but agreed to begin evacuation at 8:15 a.m. We're told approximately 1,850 people were successfully evacuated before the collapse. The room spun. 1,850 people evacuated, but the building held 2,050. "You saved them," I whispered to Grandpa. "You saved almost everyone." "Not everyone," he said, and the weight of those words would stay with him forever. The phone rang. Greg's number. I answered so fast I nearly dropped it. "Chris." "Jesus Christ." "Chris, are you watching this?" Greg's voice was high, borderline hysterical. "I was in the stairwell when they called the evacuation. I'd just gotten your papers. 5th floor when the building came down. The stairwell held just long enough. I'm alive. I'm alive because I was getting your stupid papers." Relief flooded through me so hard I had to sit down. Then another call. "Paige. Chris. I'm okay." I made it out. Most of us made it out, but not everyone. Janet stayed to grab hard drives from the server room. She didn't make it in time. The news kept flowing. The building had collapsed at its base. The underground parking structure failing exactly as Grandpa Harold had predicted. Water from a broken man had been eating at the experimental concrete for months, maybe years. The building's smart sensors had categorized the degradation as normal settling, never triggering alarms. Mom arrived, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me. "Your grandfather called us all. We thought he'd lost his mind, but he knew. Somehow he knew." Dad stood with his arm around Grandpa, who seemed to shrink with each update about those who didn't make it out. Security guards who stayed to help evacuation, maintenance workers in the basement, early arrivals who thought they had more time. "I should have called sooner," Grandpa whispered. "If I'd called at 3:00 a.m., when I first knew, maybe they'd all have lived." But looking at him, this 85-year-old man who'd driven through the night, who'd pounded on doors and made desperate calls and refused to be dismissed as senile, I saw the truth. He'd done something impossible. He'd listened to concrete and steel sing their death song, and he'd saved 850 lives, including mine. 3 weeks later, the investigation revealed what Grandpa had known in his bones. The experimental concrete mix used in Liberty Tower's construction contained a calcium compound that reacted catastrophically with prolonged water exposure. The broken water main hidden beneath the parking structure had been slowly dissolving the building's foundation for 16 months. The smart sensors had been programmed to ignore gradual changes, interpreting the daily degradation as normal settling. The building had been dying for over a year, and only one person had heard its death rattle. Of the 250 employees who worked at Liberty Tower, 850 made it out alive. The 200 who didn't became names I memorized, faces I saw when I closed my eyes. Janet Morrison, my boss who stayed behind to save company data. Thomas Chen, the security guard who refused to leave until every floor was checked. Maria Sanchez, the cleaning woman who was in the basement storage room. Each name represented a life that ended where mine should have. At the memorial service held in Lincoln Park under a gray April sky, I met their families. A woman named Bethany Chen grabbed my hands with desperate strength. "Your grandfather saved my husband. He was IT support on the 30th floor. Our twins still have a father because of that evacuation. Please thank him for me." I met dozens more. Each survivor had a story. The accountant who just returned from maternity leave, the intern on his 3rd day, the executive who'd almost skipped the evacuation thinking it was a drill. They all lived because an 85-year-old man had recognized the signs of disaster and refused to be silenced. Grandpa became reluctantly famous. The media called him the guardian of Liberty Tower and the man who heard death coming. Interview requests poured in from every major network. He declined them all. Fame wasn't what changed him. It was the weight of the 200 he couldn't save. "I should have called earlier," he'd say during our Thursday lunches, which we never missed. "Now you saved 850 lives, Grandpa, but not all of them." The city demolished what remained of Liberty Tower and transformed the lot into a memorial park. Each victim got a tree, 200 trees in neat rows with plaques bearing names and ages. Grandpa visited every week, touching each trunk like he once touched concrete pillars, speaking apologies to the wind. 6 months later, our son was born. We named him Harold, though we'd call him Hal. As I held him for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Grandpa whispered to him, "Trust your gut, little one. And when someone who loves you says something's wrong, you listen, even if the whole world says they're crazy." The investigation changed building codes nationwide. The experimental concrete was banned. Sensors were recalibrated to flag any structural anomaly, no matter how gradual. They called it the Herald Protocol, though Grandpa hated the name. "Should call it the Common Sense Protocol," he'd grumble. I never returned to corporate finance. The thought of working in another high-rise made my chest tight. Instead, I started teaching risk assessment at the community college using Liberty Tower as a case study. Emma supported the change even though it meant half the salary. "Money isn't worth your peace of mind," she'd say, holding baby Hal close. "Grandpa still calls at odd hours sometimes. Last week at 100 a.m., that new restaurant on Main Street, the one with the fancy lights. Don't eat there. Something's off about their storage area. We didn't eat there." 2 days later, the health department shut them down for violations that could have caused serious food poisoning. Some might say Grandpa has a gift, some kind of supernatural sense for danger. He laughs at that. It's not magic, he insists. It's 42 years of paying attention. Buildings food people, they all give warnings before they fail. Most folks are just too busy to notice. But I know the truth goes deeper. It's love that drives him to patrol the city at night, checking the places where his family works and eats and lives. Love that makes an old man stand guard over his grandson's world. He saved 850 people that day, but in his heart only one mattered: his grandson, who was about to become a father. The others were what he calls fortunate proximity, but I know better. Each life saved carries a piece of his enormous heart. Grandpa Harold still builds things, though not with concrete and steel anymore. He builds safety nets made of intuition, experience, and fierce protective love. When he calls at 200 a.m. with a warning, no matter how strange it sounds, I listen. Our whole family does now. Dad had sensors installed in Grandpa's truck, so we know when he's out on his midnight patrols. Mom keeps a notebook of his warnings, and she's noted an 87% accuracy rate. Buildings talk, Grandpa tells baby Hal during their daily visits. Concrete sings, steel whispers, and love, little one. Love screams the loudest of all. You just have to learn how to listen. The truth is, we're all buildings in a way, carrying weight, facing pressure, sometimes cracking where no one can see. And sometimes, if we're lucky, someone who loves us notices the signs before we collapse. Someone who refuses to let us fall even when the whole world says they're wrong to worry. That someone saved my life with a 2 a.m. phone call and won 850 other lives with his stubborn refusal to be dismissed. Buildings talk grandfather's love, and sometimes that's all the magic this world needs. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone who's watched over you, please share it with them. Let them know their vigilance matters. Comment below with your own stories of intuition that saved the day. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of the bonds that keep us safe. Sometimes the most ordinary people become extraordinary heroes simply by refusing to stay silent when every instinct screams danger. The first thing I remember about that day was the silence. We were standing in the cemetery in Seattle, the fog rolling in from the bay, and my grandmother's casket was being lowered into the ground. Everyone around me bowed their heads, some in tears. But my parents weren't grieving. They were already arguing. My father's voice cut through the quiet like a knife as he told my mother she had no right to touch my grandmother's estate. She fired back that she deserved half because she had been the only one by her mother-in-law's side in the final weeks. Their voices grew louder, sharper, until the mourners began to shift uncomfortably. Then, in the middle of it all, my father turned to me. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't care who heard. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Lucas, you get nothing. You don't deserve a single dollar of her fortune." She stepped in and added, "Your grandmother may have spoiled you, but she didn't raise a man who can carry the Carter name with pride." The words hit me harder than the cold wind. My parents had never missed an opportunity to remind me I was a disappointment, but to hear it here at my grandmother's funeral in front of family and friends was unbearable. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger buried because I knew if I spoke my voice would crack. I wanted to scream that I never cared about the money. All I cared about was her. Grandma Evelyn had been the only one who made me feel like I belonged. She had told me once, "You see the world differently, Lucas, and that's your gift." Now she was gone, and I stood there surrounded by family who saw me as nothing more than a waste of space. But what I didn't know was that she had left me something after all, something far more powerful than money. When the service ended, the family lawyer walked up to me quietly and said, "Lucas, there's something your grandmother wanted you to have." He handed me an old sealed envelope with my name written across it in her familiar handwriting. I tore it open, my hands shaking. The first line I read made me stop breathing. Seattle has always had a way of looking beautiful and cold at the same time. The morning of my grandmother's funeral was no different. The fog pressed down over the streets, swallowing the tops of the old Victorian homes and clinging to the church steeple like a heavy shroud. The bells rang slowly, their hollow sound echoing across the cemetery, and every note seemed to remind me of what I had lost. My grandmother, Evelyn Carter, had been the heart of our family, though my parents would never admit it. She was the one who pulled us together for holidays, who remembered every birthday, who slipped me notes of encouragement when I was failing to meet the impossible standards of my mother and father. Without her, the family felt like a house with no foundation, leaning and ready to collapse. I stood near the front stiff in a black suit that did not feel like mine. I had borrowed it from a friend because my parents never thought it was worth spending money on me for things like this. My hands were shoved into my pockets, and my head was bowed, though not in prayer. I was trying to keep my eyes away from them. Linda and Richard. Carter. My parents were dressed like royalty, even in mourning. My mother wore a tailored black dress, her pearl necklace gleaming against her pale skin. She dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, though I had not seen her shed a real tear for my grandmother. My father stood tall beside her, a silver tie around his neck, his jaw set in that expression he wore whenever he wanted the world to know he was in control. They looked like a grieving couple, but I knew better. Their grief was not for my grandmother. Their minds were on her fortune. $15 million spread across properties, investments, and a lifetime of careful savings. To them, her death was not just a loss. It was an opportunity, one they each wanted to claim. I thought back to how different things were when Grandma was alive. Evelyn had a way of softening the sharp edges of my parents. She would hold my hand at dinner when my father began to criticize me for not following his footsteps into law. She would slide an extra cookie onto my plate when my mother scolded me for gaining weight. She had told me once in her gentle voice, "Lucas, don't let them measure your worth by their yardstick. You have a gift, and one day the world will see it." Those words carried me through nights when I felt like I was suffocating under my parents' disappointment. My mother never hid her disdain for me. She had wanted a son who looked and acted like her vision of a polished, ambitious ruthless. Instead, she got me. She often reminded me of that fact. "You waste your time with art and books," she would say. "Do you think paintings will put food on your table? Do you think your grandmother's money will carry you forever? It won't." My father was worse in his own way. His words cut deeper because he delivered them with certainty as if they were law. "You are not strong enough to lead this family." He once told me, "You don't deserve the name Carter. You're weak." I tried to hide my pain from them, but Grandma always saw through me. She would pat my shoulder and tell me that strength was not always about how loud you spoke or how much money you earned. She said real strength was in kindness and honesty qualities. She insisted I had, even when I felt invisible. As the priest spoke about her life, I looked around at the faces of the mourners. My Uncle Henry was there, shifting impatiently in his seat, his eyes flicking to the polished casket as if it were a treasure chest instead of a resting place. He had always been a shadow behind my father, following his lead, waiting for scraps of power or wealth. My cousins whispered among themselves, their dark suits too crisp, their eyes bright with curiosity about what the will might say. None of them were there for her. Not really. They were there for what she left behind. I stood among them and felt like a stranger in my own family. I had no claim, no voice, no presence in their world of money and power. But inside me was a storm. I loved her. I missed her. I hated that her death had become a spectacle, a stage for greed and ambition. When the priest finally lowered his voice in prayer, I closed my eyes and tried to remember her laugh. It was soft, almost musical, the kind of laugh that made you want to smile no matter how bad your day was. I pictured the afternoons we spent in her kitchen, her teaching me how to bake bread while she told stories about her childhood. She had grown up with nothing. Raised by a single mother who cleaned houses to survive. Everything she built with her own 2 hands. That was the woman we were supposed to be honoring. But all I could hear was the sharp edge of my parents' whispers as they argued behind me about what they believed was rightfully theirs. By the time the casket was lowered into the earth, I felt hollow. My family was splintering in front of me, and I had no way to stop it. Yet in the middle of that emptiness, I also felt the faintest spark of something else. My grandmother had always been deliberate, always thinking ahead. I had no idea yet what she had left behind, but I could not shake the feeling that this day, as heavy and suffocating as it was, would not be the end of her influence on me. It would be the beginning. The moment the service ended, the atmosphere shifted. What had been cloaked in silence and forced reverence cracked open into hushed conversations, quick glances, and the unmistakable buzz of family politics. People drifted toward the reception hall, but my parents stayed close to the casket. Their voices were low at first, then louder, sharp enough for the nearest mourners to hear. My father's jaw was clenched and his hands cut the air as he argued. "You don't get to touch a penny of this estate," he snapped at my mother. "I made the decisions that kept her assets safe. I built this family's reputation while you sat back." Linda straightened her shoulders, her voice cutting back with practiced venom. "You think you carried her fortune on your back. I was the one by her side when she was sick. I handled her doctors. I gave up my time while you buried yourself in work. If anyone deserves a share, it's me." Their fight grew louder, echoing through the hall. Some relatives tried to pretend they didn't notice, but others watched openly. My Uncle Henry leaned against a column with his arms crossed, a thin smirk on his lips, as if he enjoyed watching them tear each other apart. My cousins whispered to one another, eyes darting between my parents like spectators at a boxing match. I felt the stares pressing down on me, waiting to see where I fit in this circus. My father turned suddenly, his gaze locking on me. His face was flushed, his voice harsh enough to silence the chatter. "And as for you, Lucas," he said, his words slicing through the air, "don't think for 1 second you're entitled to anything. You've done nothing to earn it. You've been nothing but a disappointment." A wave of heat shot through me, my heart pounding in my chest. My mother didn't step in to defend me. She only folded her arms, her lips curling in disdain. "He's right," she said coldly. "Your grandmother may have spoiled you with her attention, but she didn't prepare you for the reality of this family. You don't contribute. You don't lead. You are not part of what we've built." Their voices carried so clearly that I saw one of my grandmother's old friends flinch. The woman glanced at me with pity, her eyes soft, but she said nothing. No one said anything. The silence of the others made my parents' cruelty echo louder. Uncle Henry let out a low chuckle. "Guess you'll have to finally learn what it's like to work for a living," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "No more leaning on family handouts." I felt the humiliation burn in my chest. I wanted to shout to remind them that I had never asked for money, that I had never cared about wealth the way they did. All I had wanted was their approval, their acceptance, some acknowledgement that I mattered beyond my failures in their eyes. But I bit down hard, my teeth grinding together, because if I spoke, I knew my voice would shake. I thought of my grandmother again, of her telling me to hold my head high, to find strength in who I was, not who they wanted me to be. But in that moment, those words felt far away, drowned out by the sharp edge of my parents' rejection. The argument between Linda and Richard kept spiraling. They spoke of assets, properties, investment portfolios, each claim more selfish than the last. They didn't even lower their voices anymore. It was as if my grandmother's grave was nothing more than a stage for their greed. The shame clung to me like smoke. Every time I looked up, I caught the eyes of someone watching. Some looked embarrassed for me, others entertained by the spectacle. No one spoke up to stop it. No one told them they had gone too far. I wanted to walk away, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. Every word they hurled at each other seemed to chip away at the image of family I had once held on to. All that remained was the truth. I was alone among them. My parents had made their judgment public. To them, I was not just unworthy of the inheritance. I was unworthy of carrying the family name at all. When the argument finally slowed, it was not because they reached an agreement, but because they had exhausted themselves. My father's face was red with anger. My mother's lips were pressed in a thin, victorious smile, though she had gained nothing. My Uncle Henry whispered something to one of my cousins, and they laughed quietly as they walked away. I stood there silent, feeling every eye turn away from me. My parents had humiliated me in front of everyone. They had stripped me of dignity at the one place I should have been allowed to mourn in peace. I turned my face toward the ground, blinking hard to keep my vision clear. Inside, anger and sadness clashed like fire and ice. I wanted to scream to leave, to disappear, but I stayed, forcing myself to stand still. I told myself I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I thought that was the end of it, that the funeral would be remembered only for their fight and my humiliation. But just when I was ready to walk away, a quiet voice behind me stopped me. "Lucas," the lawyer said softly, "your grandmother left something for you." The chaos of my parents' argument was still echoing in my head when I felt a hand rest gently on my shoulder. I turned and saw David Monroe, my grandmother's lawyer. He was a tall man with gray hair combed neatly back, his dark suit pressed to perfection. His presence was calm, steady, and completely out of place in the storm of greed that had just swallowed my family whole. "Lucas," he said quietly, so that no one else could hear, "your grandmother asked me to speak with you today." For a moment I thought I had misheard him. My parents had just declared to the world that I was cut out of everything, that I had no place in the Carter estate. Yet here was the lawyer, the man who knew every detail of my grandmother's will, looking at me with a seriousness that told me this was not about them. This was about me. I nodded, my throat dry, and followed him as he gestured toward a small study tucked off the side of the church hall. The door closed behind us, muting the sound of laughter and hushed whispers from the other mourners. The room was dim, lit only by the pale light coming through a narrow stained glass window. A wooden desk stood in the center, and on it lay a single envelope worn with age, yellowed at the edges. My name was written across the front in handwriting. I knew instantly. My grandmother's. My chest tightened as I stepped closer. I reached out but hesitated, my fingers hovering above it. The last time I had seen that handwriting had been on birthday cards and little notes she used to slip into my sketchbooks. Now it was here waiting for me. Like her voice reaching out one final time, David spoke softly behind me. "She left this for you alone. She was very clear that no one else was to see it. She trusted you, Lucas." Those words hit me harder than any insult my parents had ever thrown my way. She trusted me in a family where I was constantly told I was unworthy. My grandmother had set me apart. My heart pounded as I picked up the envelope. The paper felt fragile, as though it might crumble in my hands, but the weight of it was undeniable. For a moment, doubt clawed at me. What if it was just a letter of comfort? Words meant to soften the blow of my exclusion from the estate. What if it was nothing more than a reminder to stay strong? I wanted to believe it was more, but a lifetime of being overlooked had trained me not to hope too much. Still, I slid my finger beneath the flap and tore it open. Inside was a folded letter carefully written in her elegant script and a small brass key attached to a ribbon. My breath caught as I laid them on the desk. I unfolded the letter, my hands trembling. The first line stopped me cold. "Lucas, you are the only one who ever truly saw me, not my money. This is why I trust you with what no one else knows." I read the line again and again, each word cutting through the noise of my parents' cruelty. My grandmother had seen me. She had known the truth about this family, about their obsession with wealth and power. And she had chosen me for something. I glanced at David, who gave me a small nod. "Take your time," he said. I kept reading. Her words were filled with love and a kind of urgency I had never heard from her before. She wrote about how she had spent her life building not just wealth, but a legacy she did not want corrupted by greed. She wrote about the importance of truth, about the need for someone in the family to carry her values forward. And then she explained the key. The brass key, she wrote, belonged to a safety deposit box at a bank not far from her old home. Inside was something she had never spoken of to anyone else, something that was not included in the estate, something my parents and uncle knew nothing about. She made it clear that it was meant for me alone. I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, relief that I had not been forgotten, gratitude that she had left me something meant only for me, and fear because whatever was in that box carried weight far beyond money. The way she wrote about it, it sounded less like a gift and more like a responsibility. I set the letter down my hand, pressing against the desk to steady myself. I thought of my parents outside, laughing with relatives already scheming about how to split the fortune. If they knew about this, they would never let me keep it. They would fight me for it, crush me under their power the way they always had. David's voice broke my thoughts. She believed in you, Lucas. She said you were the only one who could handle what she left behind. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. I had a choice. I could tuck the letter back into the envelope, pretend it was nothing, and let my life continue the way it always had on the outside, invisible, powerless. Or I could take the key, hold on to her trust, and step into whatever she had prepared for me. I reached for the key. The brass was cool against my palm, heavier than I expected. As I closed my fingers around it, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt stronger than my parents' words. I felt chosen. I slipped the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into my jacket. The key I clenched tightly, unwilling to let it go. When I turned back to David, he was watching me carefully as though he could see the decision I had just made. "I'll honor her trust," I said quietly. "Whatever she left, I'll protect it." David nodded once. That's what she wanted. As I stepped out of the study, the murmur of voices washed over me again. My parents were still in the reception hall, their smiles false, their eyes sharp as they worked the room. They didn't notice me at first, and for once I was glad. I kept my hand in my pocket, my fingers wrapped tightly around the key. They thought they had stripped me of everything, but they were wrong. My grandmother had given me something none of them could touch, and I was determined to find out exactly what it was. I could barely sleep that night. The envelope and the key sat on my nightstand, a silent reminder that my grandmother had chosen me for something my parents and uncle knew nothing about. My mind replayed her words again and again. She trusted me. She saw me. That thought alone was enough to keep me awake. But the weight of the key added another layer. What could she have left behind that was so important it had to be hidden away from everyone else? By the next morning, I could not wait any longer. I dressed quickly and tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, making sure the key was secure in my hand. The streets of Seattle were still wet from a light rain as I walked toward the bank listed in her letter. It was an old brick building on the corner of a busy street, the kind of place that looked as though it had been there for generations. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. A man in a dark vest greeted me politely. My voice shook slightly as I explained I needed access to a safety deposit box under my grandmother's name. He checked my ID, compared it to the authorization she had left on file, and then led me down a long hallway to a vault door that looked like it belonged in a museum. With a series of clicks and turns, the door opened, and we stepped inside a room lined with small metal doors. He pointed to the one marked with my grandmother's number. "You may use one of the private rooms," he said, handing me a tray where I could place the contents. I nodded and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for me. When the box slid free, my chest tightened. I carried it carefully into a side room and closed the door behind me. The box was heavier than I expected. I set it on the table, hesitated for a breath, and then lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of leather-bound journals tied with a faded ribbon, a velvet pouch, and a sealed envelope addressed again in her handwriting. "To Lucas, when you are ready." My hands shook as I untied the ribbon around the journals. The leather was worn, the pages yellowed at the edges. I opened the first one and felt like I had stepped into another world. These were my grandmother's diaries, written over decades. She had documented everything: her struggles growing up poor, her years of building the family fortune, the sacrifices she had made, and the truths she had kept hidden. As I turned the pages, my eyes widened. She wrote about how Richard and Linda had betrayed her trust over the years, manipulating her finances, pressuring her into investments for their own gain. She wrote about Henry secretly siphoning money using her name for deals she never approved. She had known about their greed all along, but had kept quiet to protect the family name. And in her words was a message meant only for me. "Lucas, you must know the truth. They will destroy each other for wealth, but you must not become them. These journals are my legacy. With them comes responsibility and the choice of what to do with the truth." I sat back, stunned. All my life I had been told I was weak, unworthy, a disappointment. Yet here was proof that my grandmother had seen through everyone else's masks and trusted me to hold her story. She had not only left me wealth of a different kind, she had left me power. My hands moved to the velvet pouch. I untied the string and poured the contents onto the table. A collection of jewelry spilled out, but these were not ordinary heirlooms. Each piece was vintage rare and unmistakably valuable. A diamond brooch, a string of pearls, a gold pocket watch engraved with her initials. Beneath them was a folded certificate of ownership for a property. In her name, a small cottage on the coast north of Seattle. It was separate from the main estate, something my parents did not even know existed. She had left it all for me. Finally, I picked up the sealed envelope. My name stood out in bold letters across the front. With a deep breath, I opened it. Her words were direct. "Lucas, I have left you what I could not trust in anyone else's hands. The journals contain the truths I could never speak aloud. The jewelry and the property are yours alone, gifts to remind you of my faith in you. Do not waste them. Use them to build a life that reflects who you are, not who they want you to be. Remember, wealth means nothing without integrity. Promise me you will carry forward what I valued most: honesty, kindness, and courage." Tears blurred my vision as I lowered the letter. She had not just given me things of value. She had given me her heart, her story, her belief that I could be more than the shadow my parents cast over me. I sat there for a long time, the journals stacked neatly in front of me, the jewelry glittering in the dim light. The property certificate lay beside them, a symbol of independence I had never known. For the first time in my life, I felt as though I had been seen for who I truly was. I knew that if my parents ever discovered what I now held, they would stop at nothing to take it from me. But I also knew something else. I was no longer powerless. My grandmother had given me more than an inheritance. She had given me a choice. I could stay silent and keep her secret safe, or I could use the truth in those journals to confront the family that had spent years trying to crush me. As I gathered the contents back into the box, one thing was certain. My grandmother's legacy was not just money or property. It was a call to action. She had trusted me with the truth, and I would not let her down. I left the bank with the weight of the box in my arms and a steady fire in my chest. My parents thought they had erased me from the family. They had no idea that the real legacy was in my hands. Walking out of the bank that morning, the city looked different. The same fog drifted between the buildings. The same cable cars rattled along the tracks. But something in me had shifted. For the first time in my life, I carried more than shame or disappointment. I carried proof that my grandmother had seen my worth. She had left me not only valuables and property, but also her words, her trust, and her belief that I could be different from the rest of the world. I tucked the journals into my backpack and held the envelope close to my chest as I walked through the streets of Seattle. People passed by busy with their own lives, unaware of the storm I had just come through. To them, I was just another man in a suit. But to me, I was someone new. I was no longer the forgotten son, no longer the boy dismissed by his parents as weak. I was the keeper of my grandmother's legacy. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment and opened the first journal again. Her handwriting filled the pages like a voice speaking directly into my ear. She wrote about her struggles, her triumphs, and the choices that shaped her. I read until my eyes grew heavy, and when I finally set the book down, I felt as though I had been given a map. She had lived with strength, resilience, and integrity. Even when others tried to drag her down, she wanted me to do the same. The jewelry and the property certificate remained tucked safely away, their financial value undeniable. But they were not what kept me awake that night. It was her words echoing in my mind. Wealth means nothing without integrity. Promise me you will carry forward what I valued most: honesty, kindness, and courage. In the days that followed, my parents never asked about me. They assumed I had left the funeral, humiliated another casualty in their endless fight for control. They believed they had silenced me. That belief gave me freedom. For the first time, I was not chasing their approval. I was not waiting for their recognition. I was standing on my own, guided by my grandmother's voice and the secrets she had entrusted to me. I visited the small cottage on the coast north of Seattle a week later. It sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the waves crashing below the wind carrying the salty scent of the sea. The house was simple, with white shutters and a garden that had grown wild. Inside the walls held photographs of her life memories carefully preserved. It felt like a sanctuary, a place untouched by the greed and anger that consumed my family. I stood in the kitchen where sunlight spilled through the windows, and I could almost hear her laugh again. I knew then that this was more than a property. It was a gift of peace, a place where I could rebuild myself away from their shadows. I realized that my parents' cruelty had never been about me. It had been about their own emptiness, their hunger for power, their fear of losing control. I had spent years carrying the weight of their rejection, believing I was broken. But in truth, I had been free all along. They were the ones chained to greed. I was the one my grandmother chose because I could see beyond it. When I thought about what to do with the journals, I wrestled with the choice. Part of me wanted to expose the truth, to show the world the lies and corruption that ran through my family. Another part of me wanted to protect her secrets, to honor her memory by keeping the focus on the values she lived by. In the end, I understood her message clearly. The power was not in tearing others down. The power was in building a life that reflected the love and honesty she had given me. So that is what I chose. I would not waste my time fighting my parents for money they did not deserve. I would not become them. I would honor her by carving my own path, carrying her lessons with me every step of the way. When I look back now, I see her funeral as more than an ending. It was the beginning of the life she always wanted me to live. A life where I was no longer invisible, no longer defined by rejection, but instead by the strength she saw in me all along. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. Family can fail you. Parents can wound you. But love and belief from even one person can change everything. My grandmother gave me that gift. She gave me the reminder that our value is not measured by wealth or approval, but by the courage to be true to who we are. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it made you feel something, do me a favor like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment about your own experiences with family loss or finding strength in unexpected places. And if you want to hear more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know, and it keeps these stories